1. I'm in the middle of kicking the coddled housemate out right now. Husband and I took the dude in 2018, and was supposed to be for a few months. Initially it worked out great. We're older, husband had just retired and I was late 50s. And not in the best physical shape, and housemate did all the yard work, so even without him paying rent, he definitely more than pulled his weight. Then COVID hit, and the government paid us all to stay at home and not work. And housemate got used to being able to stay home and game all day. He started doing less and less around the house. Suggestions, followed by specific requests for rent, were met with rare rent payments, and progressively less and less yard and housework. Shortly before COVID, he had acquired an ancient Chevy van that he was going to fix up. Instead of actually buying the parts and working on it, he would talk about what he wanted to do with it and spend his money on whiskey instead. The man is a functional alcoholic, not that he'll ever admit to that. Things have been getting progressively worse, and we've been telling him for 2 years that he needs to look into new living arrangements, but we've never before given him an actual deadline. Then, we got back from visiting family over the weekend between Christmas and New Year's to have a letter from the town about blight ordinance violations related to the rusty Chevy lawn ornament. So we told him on the 30th of December. He had a week to get it registered.
It's not enough time.
He had the DMV appointment on the 7th, but it turned out to be during a work shift, so he cancelled the appointment without setting up a new one. We reminded him on the 13th that this needed to be ASAP, since any fines accrue to us as the homeowners, not to him. And if it wasn't done by today, the 17th, we'd have the thing towed. He lost it.
It's a classic. It's in better shape than both of your cars put together.
It hasn't moved in 5 years, the tires are completely rotted, the brake lines are gone, it has weeds growing up through the engine bay. And I can only imagine how little of the wiring the local rodent population has left uneaten, given how much of mine they have munched on, and my car is driven daily. We also demanded my spare keys back yesterday. We had given him his 30-day official written notice to move out on the 7th, and there's no reason we should continue to let him have use of our cars when we can't count on him for assistance when we need it, because he's been drinking all afternoon or forgot and made other plans. He was supposed to pick us up from the train station after the out-of-town trip, but we ended up taking a taxi because he forgot, and then lost his spare keys for my husband's car. Last week my husband had to be taken to ER by EMS. I haven't driven in almost 3 months due to a bad concussion, still have 24/7 headaches, vertigo, and my glasses haven't been replaced yet. And I had to drive 15 miles each way after dark to pick him up, because the housemate was drunk. We're not in a good area for an Uber. My spare keys had not been returned before he left for work today, so we stopped by and asked where they were. He assured us he'd left them on the counter. We told them to put them in the drawer where we keep the spares. Idiot can't even follow directions. And then asked if we were going to tow the van. I said yes. He was actually yelling at us in his work parking lot and then texted us a bit later.
Towing a van is not a wise decision.
Nice bit of threat there. We reminded him about the keys, again, tomorrow. It's a newer Hyundai, and due to the ignition being destroyed when someone tried to jack it last year, I need 2 keys. One for the doors, one for the ignition, and the fob. If I have to replace them, it will be at least $250. You can't just go down to the local hardware store and get a new one cut. However, by the time we got home from shopping, he was at the house with his father emptying his personal stuff from the van. I guess he has accepted that the thing is going, and I've arranged for a non-consensual tow tomorrow. He can get it back if he pays for it, but it can't be on my property if it isn't registered, and it can't be here after February 7th either. But he thinks he's been nothing but nice to us and has done all this stuff for us. He's constantly helping us out. He does help out, but only if we can catch him when he hasn't started drinking for the day. And apparently telling him that I just want my house back is calling him a dictator and is the cruelest thing he's ever heard me say to anyone. Suggestions that he could have done a lot more if he didn't spend the $60 to $100 a week on whiskey are met with,
"We all have our vices."
Nice bit of deflection, dude. It's also my fault that he didn't get his taxes done in the last 2 years. He has a single W-2. I've walked him through filling out a 1040 EZ online several times over the years, and so has my daughter, but he claims he can't do it, it's too hard.
If you were a nice person, you'd help when someone asks you.
Pointing out that I have some major issues of my own the last few years, and that I need to save me first, and then my husband and kid, and he comes much further down the list of people to help. It doesn't register with him at all. He doesn't want to hear it. He just wants to complain about how crappy my housekeeping is. Yes, I've got hoarding issues, possible ADHD, childhood abuse, neglect, a bunch of stuff we're only just figuring out. And too many cats. Meow. Suggestions that he help with the cat boxes are met with,
"You aren't my cats."
He claims he offered to help with cleaning the house, but his help is about 2 minutes of stuff, and then he goes off to smoke, and we can never get him back to do anything. If it isn't fun, it isn't going to get done. The next few weeks are probably going to be unpleasant. But even though my stress levels are going through the roof, I can tell that my anxiety is actually going down. And at least the avoidance stuff is helping me work on sorting out the mess that is my kitchen. So I've got that going for me. At this rate, by Monday, I'll be able to mop the floors, and we'll have to get a cheap rug for under the table, so the cats don't slide and break their necks when they hit something. I've also noticed that our cats have been much less cranky with less fighting since he has been hiding in his room to avoid everyone. So once he's completely out of the house, I think the feline behavioral issues will probably lessen considerably, since the problem children are already coming down. Yes, I'm probably being an a-hole. No, you're not. But sadly, when you're a doormat and reach your breaking point, ain't that the truth, you tend to explode and go scorched earth. And I'm way past breaking point. And for those who've actually listened to the whole thing, thanks for listening to the vent. I needed to write this all out. There aren't a lot of people I can vent to in real life. Update. Finally found the car keys last night. They were on the counter at the very back, hidden behind the canisters that are supposed to live there, even when the kitchen is in perfect order and cleanliness. He must have tossed the keys as far back as he could, presumably to make it as hard as possible for me to find. He's been staying somewhere else for this last few days. His parents? And it's been wonderfully quiet and calm, and everyone, especially the cats, have been enjoying the peace. Sadly, I've been overdoing the physical activity in the last few days, so today, and maybe tomorrow, will be rest days. But now, even with putting in only at most an hour a day, I can see the improvement in the downstairs. Folks, I really recommend trying to avoid severe concussions. 12 weeks of 24/7 headaches with no foreseeable endpoint isn't worth the PTO. 2. I had a really stupid roommate. His name is Jeremy. I'm not sure if he's still alive or not, because I cut all communication from him a decade or so ago. He once tried adopting a stray cat, even though we already had 2 cats. That was around our apartment building, and tried to hide that fact. I'm not sure how you can hide the fact that you took in a stray. I swear this guy was so dumb, he tried to give the cat a bath in the bathtub at some stupid hour of the night while I was sleeping, got bit and scratched, and made all kinds of noise waking me up. I chewed his butt out for bringing in the stray cat, and for waking me up, and for being dumb and trying to wash a cat that's not his. He got rid of the cat, and the very next day his hands were swollen. He refused to go to the hospital because he didn't believe in hospitals or antibiotics or modern medicine. He believed in traditional medicine. After 2 more days, he has pus oozing from his hands, and his hands and arms were massive. He finally comes up to me and asks if I would take him to the hospital. We arrive, they quickly send him back, and he refuses to get IV antibiotics or any antibiotics. I'm not sure what he was hoping they would do for him. After a quick argument back and forth, he finally gave in. They admitted him and put him on IV antibiotics for 24 to 36 hours, might have been longer, can't remember because it was a couple of decades ago. They released him once his hands and arms were half the size and getting better. He's the kind of person who only cares about himself and nobody else. He doesn't think about anybody else or how his actions would impact anybody else. He is truly the definition of an inconsiderate, self-centered a-hole. I was introduced to him by my best friend, Chris, who I still talk to on a semi-regular basis. Life. Jeremy was homeless at the time when Chris had met him through an outreach ministry at his local church. Chris knew I had to move soon and thought it would be a good idea for Jeremy and I to become roommates. I didn't know Jeremy existed up to this point. Chris had given me a heads up that Jeremy had issues with finances, but that Jeremy had a job. I was extremely hesitant and didn't want to do it. But I met him, and we agreed that he would pay rent at least a month in advance, and we moved forward. We moved into the ghetto, at a super cheap apartment complex. Rent was like $400 a month for 2 bedrooms. You know it's a ghetto when you realize months later that the neighbor above you was stealing your electricity. I saw an extension cord running from their window to the electric box. I was getting $400 a month electric bills year-round. I tried calling the electric company, but they said it would cost me at least $100 for them to dispatch a truck. And at the time I didn't have the money. I was so angry at them. I later found out this wasn't true, so whoever the rep was either misinformed or lying. Jeremy loved bicycles, and I mean loved bicycles. So much, in fact, that he, really loved bicycles, if you know what I mean. It was extremely disturbing and perverted. I didn't even know anything about the world of bicycles until I met him. I only knew of bicycles that you get at Walmart, and that's it. He taught me a lot about them. This plays a role later in the story. Shortly after moving in, I found out that he was having issues paying rent, staying 1 month in advance even with the job. Rent was an afterthought when it came to finances for him. He would buy stuff that he wanted, then with any money left over he would put towards bills. This irritated the crap out of me. He ended up losing the job but found another shortly after. While living there, he gets a notification that a family member died and left a large lump of money. Something to the tune of $8,000 to $9,000, I believe. He didn't care about going to a funeral or anything. He just wanted the money. When he finally got a hold of the money, I asked him if he would give me his half of the rent for the next year, which to me is reasonable. I didn't ask for rent and utilities, just his whole half of the rent for the year. He said no, but I tried to talk him into it. He got angry and yelled at me saying something like, "It's my money, and I get to decide how I want to spend it." Of course he wanted to put the vast majority of it towards a new bicycle, some kind of aluminium or carbon fiber bike that was $8,000. But that never happened, thankfully. Before he had a chance to spend any of the money, he asked if I would take him to Michigan, we live in central Ohio, and get his stuff out of self-storage, and he offered me a few $100s to take him there, so I took the money and drove him up. What I didn't know at the time was that he was past due in his payments, and they locked him out. When we finally got up there, I found out and I was not amused. He bought a bolt cutter and snapped the locks off and took all the stuff out. He owned like 1 or 2 expensive bikes. We drove back with his stuff. Jeremy isn't the smartest when it comes to life. As you can tell, he rode his bikes around and didn't lock them up when he went into places. And one of the times he had one of his bikes stolen. He was so mad. You'd think that this would be a lesson, but nope. The job he was at had him going door to door for some political affiliation. This guy loved politics. Personally, I hate politics and try to stay out of it whenever I can. One day, out of the blue, I get a phone call from the county jail, and it was Jeremy. He was arrested for peering into people's homes through their windows and watching people. He also had a warrant out for his arrest as well, from Michigan, which neither of us knew. I can't recall what the warrant was for, but it had something to do with him not showing up for a court appointment or something. That's all I know about it. I can't remember if he had a kid or not, or if he was previously married. He lost his job, obviously. He had all the cash on him when he got arrested and wanted me to pull his money out to bail him out. I talked with my friends and realized that if I paid the bail, I would be responsible for him to show up, or I could get in trouble. My friends suggested that I stay out of it and let him stay in there, and so I did, with the expectation that I did sign to pull the cash out, which I was successful. Jeremy wanted me to send him some of the money while he was in jail. It was at this opportunity that I paid his half of the past due and current bills. I could have taken half the money and paid his portion of the rest of the year's rent. My friends encouraged me to do that. I really wanted to do that. I wish I had done that. But it didn't feel right at the time. I will regret not doing that later. I did send him some of the money so that he could buy stuff in the jail. After a few days, I get a phone call from the jail, and Jeremy wanted me to bail out some guy he had befriended in jail. He said if we bailed out his new friend, that friend could bail out Jeremy. I talked with my friends, and they looked up his cellmate online. This dude was in jail for beating up his wife. Jeremy later called, and I told him we would not be bailing out his new friend and explained why. He wasn't happy and tried to tell me what really happened, and that it was all a misunderstanding. We still refused. After some time, the charges against Jeremy were dropped and he was released. Once Jeremy was back home, I asked him if he would pay half the rent in advance. Jeremy said no way, and that there was a multi-$1,000 bike that he's wanted all his life, and now is his chance to buy it. I was like, dude. He bought his bike, and within 2 weeks it was stolen because he didn't lock it up. He was jobless, he had no more money, and he didn't bother looking for a job when he had the money. And now here I am paying full rent for this apartment and utilities, and he wasn't paying anything except his food. He didn't care. I ended up losing my job shortly after, and I was already late on payments. I was stuck. I knew I couldn't go on like this anymore. I ended up bailing on that place and told him that I contacted the leasing office and that we had to break our lease. We only had like 2 or 3 months left on the lease, but I didn't want the money to continue. I can't remember where I moved to after that, but I made sure he moved out at the time I did so we could give back the keys and such. Him and I went our separate ways. Now you would think that this story ends here, but nope. I stayed in contact with him via telephone and found out that his mom, recovering addict, moved to Ohio and came back into his life. They wanted to move into an apartment together and asked me if I would give them money. I was like, hell no. I explained to him that he owed me a ton of money for the rent and utilities that he didn't pay. He laughed at me and hung up on me. Oh man, I was so angry. I totally forgot about that until just now. It makes me so mad just thinking about it. What an a-hole. I decided to cease communication. End of story. Nope, got one more. A few years later, Jeremy calls me up and asks for help. Apparently he and his mom had been homeless but finally got a place and wanted my help moving their stuff into their new place. I am the type of person who will try to help people when I can. At the time, I owned a 93 conversion van that I had removed the middle seats and moved up the back seats so that I could use it to move stuff. It was very useful. Anyway, the nice guy that I am, I agreed to help. Keep in mind that my van was 15 to 20 years old by that time. I asked him if he could pay back any of the money he owed me, and yet again he laughed at me and said he didn't have any spare money. I figured it was worth a try. I knew at the time I would never see that money again, so I moved on. Here's what really made me angry. I helped them move their stuff into their new place, and when we were almost done, with only 1 or 2 items left, Jeremy had accidentally knocked over a container with liquid in it, not water, and it spilled. My van had a blue carpet that was already stained and damaged over the years of its life, but still, I didn't need another addition. Jeremy takes the last items, totally ignoring the spill. He comes back out with nothing to clean the spill up with. I was like, dude, aren't you going to clean it up? He smiled and responded, why? Your van is already stained and a piece of crap anyway. My God, dude, that had me so angry. I chewed him out and he just smiled and grabbed his last item and walked away into his apartment. His mom overheard this and came out with paper towels and such, and she apologized for him and cleaned up the mess. After that, I blocked him and removed his number. He tried to contact me once or twice again after that, but I refused to answer. These kind of people don't deserve you, and you should avoid them at all costs. This is the same guy who doesn't believe in soap. He rarely showers, and when he does, he doesn't use soap, just water and nothing else. 3. So I moved in with my best friend, or I guess former best friend, and living together has completely ruined our friendship. His habits are absolutely exhausting, and I can't take it anymore. First off, he has this insane sleep routine where he blasts shows like Friends or the Joe Rogan Experience at full volume all night. Friends is loud enough with its random music and laughter, but Rogan? It's the most obnoxious thing to fall asleep to. He lets it play until 4 or 5 a.m., wakes up suddenly, smokes a cigarette on the balcony, then goes back to sleep for an hour or two before getting up for work. It is a miracle he functions, but is completely wrecking my sleep. To make it worse, the volume is so loud I've had to sleep with noise-cancelling AirPods Pro, and even then I can still hear everything. It's like I'm in the same room as his TV, but he won't even consider headphones, which is just part of a bigger issue. He's always loud. He's constantly on the phone, calling someone or blasting music from his speakers. Never headphones, never quiet. I miss the peace I used to have before he moved in. Financially, it's been a mess too. He almost never pays rent on time. Before he moved in, he promised me he'd have a financial cushion, so I wouldn't have to stress about money. Guess what? He had no money when he moved in. I covered all the bills that first month and even told him, "Don't worry about paying me back, we're best friends, and I want to help you get a fresh start away from your trauma and family." I regret it now. He also said he'd look for a job before moving in, but he didn't. He only started applying after getting here and claimed he'd burned through his savings because the move got delayed by 2 weeks, and then delayed another 2 weeks because he just stopped answering my texts. I was too patient and way too trusting. He also didn't bring a single piece of furniture to the apartment. He only brought his TV, which he uses all night for his sleep routine. Meanwhile, he's using all my furniture, the couch, the chairs, the bed, everything. And I'm starting to resent how much I've given him. He drinks every day, usually 1 or 2 beers. He uses snus regularly, which is a powder tobacco product. I found his snus packets everywhere, under the bed, in the bathtub, on the floor, even randomly stuck to the wall. It's disgusting. At first, he used to toss his cigarette butts into the kitchen trash. Well, I confronted him about it. He stopped that, thankfully. But it's clear he doesn't think about how his actions affect me or my space. Then there's the laundry. He washes his clothes every single day, even things like sweaters and hoodies that he's worn for just a few hours. He'll leave wet clothes sitting in the washing machine for hours, sometimes overnight, till they smell awful. It's like he has no concept of how to share a living space. I've been trying to give him space and freedom, even though I feel completely suffocated. I leave the apartment every weekend, so he has time to himself, and I've let him have friends, family, or even his girlfriend over when he wants. I've even let him use my bed or my room when I'm not around. But instead of being grateful, he just takes it all for granted. I told him months ago that I'm moving into my own place next month because I cannot live like this anymore. Ever since then, he's been acting cold and distant. It's awkward and intense. Honestly, living with him has been a huge wake-up call. I now see why his life has always been chaotic. He's messy, irresponsible, emotionally unstable, and just so inconsiderate. That said, I do still care about him. I really hope our friendship can get better once I've moved out and we're not living together anymore. I also think maybe he's been acting weird because he didn't have a plan for what to do next. Last year in the summer, he mentioned he wanted to move out this spring, so in November, I asked him if that was still his plan. He said yes, so I went ahead and cancelled our rental agreement. When I told him, he seemed a little shocked, like it was all happening too fast. But I feel like giving him until March is enough time. I just can't do this anymore, as I said. Has anyone else gone through something like this? How do you handle living with someone you're completely fed up with, especially when you still have time left? I just hope moving out will fix our dynamic because I do still want to be friends. 4. In September of 2023, my 2 friends, both female and 22, we'll call them Hera and Tawny, obviously not their real names, and I, also female and 22, all moved into a shared 2-bedroom with 1-year lease. Hera decided to take $100 off the rent of each Tawny and I in exchange for her own room, leaving Tawny and I to share the bigger room, which we did not mind. Now for some context, when we moved, Hera had 1 cat. Though she did not sleep at home often, she would come by to hang out, feed her cat, and clean her litter box. Around Thanksgiving 2023, she got a 2nd cat. Tawny was not home most of the week, as she worked about an hour away and stayed at her boyfriend's nearby often. Things started to go downhill around maybe February 2024. Hera never slept at home. She wouldn't come home for days or even weeks at a time to feed her cats and clean up after them. Luckily, Tony and I would do our best to feed them as often as we can, though it was not our responsibility. Without Hera cleaning their litter box, her room started to reek as cats were defecating all over her carpet instead. The smell even started to seep into the hallways, and this would often cause Tony and I to get sick. Here's the kicker. Hera was staying just down the street, 2-minute drive, I kid you not, at her boyfriend's. She easily could have come home for a few minutes every day, or even every other day, to tend to her cats. Tony and I even communicated that if she needed help feeding the cats, we were more than willing. Eventually, in May 2024, Tony and I had enough and called her out in our group chat, urging her to take care of her cats. Rather than working with us to figure out how to care for the cats, she got defensive and texted, "The cats will be out, and so will all my things." Here's yet another kicker. We got an eviction notice that month of May, as it turns out she had not paid her portion of the rent for the last 3 months. However, that situation got sorted out. After a lot of stress, she did pay her portion and the eviction notice was dropped. Now, though she insinuated that all her things were going to be moved out, she sent a text about how she will still be paying rent to make things easier for Tony and I. Cool, okay, whatever, fine. It's not like she has been living at the apartment for the past few months anyways. A few days after she sent that text, she came to pack up some of her stuff and take the cats away. However, she returned one of the cats as the shelter did not take her. On top of that, not all her belongings were moved out. A good 40% of her belongings still occupied the apartment, and she did not clean all the poo and pee spots in her room from the cats she neglected. Okay, that's fine, I guess? She's still paying her portion, and it'll be her responsibility when we move out. Fast forward to July 2024. Hera decided to text us that she is no longer able to provide for her portion of the rent starting next month, and that she was going to the leasing office to take her name off the lease. Obviously, leases don't work like that, as there has to be a unanimous agreement between the roommates, and the remaining roommates' income has to be approved, both requirements which weren't met. There's no way Tony and I were able to pick up her portion of the rent. We offered solutions like us picking up half of her rent, or clearing out her belongings and cleaning so that we can maybe sublease her room. However, she refused to pay her portion of the end of the lease, and did not clear out her room. We even offered to end the lease, but Hera refused to pay her portion to end the lease. This left Tony and I in a tough situation of scraping for money so that we did not get evicted. Every month, we would still ask for Hera's portion or to clean out her room, and she did not comply. Oh, and on top of that, one of her cats was still at the apartment. Luckily, I loved this particular cat and took over her care. The lease finally ended in October of 2024, and we moved out. Hera also finally cleaned out her room and removed her belongings. So, to put it in simple terms, she did not pay her rent in August, September, and October, though her name was on the lease and her belongings were at the apartment up until the move-out date. Tony and I decided to give her a formal notice to pay back our money, or we will seek legal action. We ended up seeking legal action, and our small claims court case hearing will be in a few days. Does this case seem like it will be in Tony and I's favor? Does Hera have any grounds to appeal? Tony and I are both nervous for this case, as we don't really have any legal help as well. Hellfreezer's note, providing you have texts and whatever else to prove that she has in fact not been paying the rent and has been refusing to pay the rent, while not accepting any reasonable compromises you had added or offered, then yeah, I think you should both be fine, so just make sure you get that evidence, and I think it'll likely go your way. If you don't, then it's going to be more difficult. Hashtag I'm not a lawyer. 5. There are 4 people in this timeline of events. Me, the OP, 33, female-ish. Harry, 34, male. Dick, 33, male. Sally, 28, probably, female. Dick is Harry's best friend from high school. Dick and I were good friends in high school, and I met Harry the year after I graduated. Dick and Sally are siblings. Harry bought a house in a county neither of us are fond of, and needed a roommate to help with bills. And I'd just gotten out of a crappy situation with my landlords. Please note, Harry and I have lived together on 2 other occasions. Once in our early 20s when we were best friends, and once in 2020, at another mutual friend's house. I am no longer friends with that person. The reason is semi-relevant. Sally also lives with us. She and I live on the top floor and share a bathroom. Harry stays in the basement. So Dick made some stupid life choices and his wife left him and took the kids. She's not being vindictive though, and let the kids visit Dick's family for Christmas. About 2-ish days before Christmas, Dick comes to stay with us for a bit. It's great. Dick has a silver tongue. I mean, he can laugh, talk, and charm his way in and out of most situations. He's a fun guy to be around. The day before Christmas, he and Sally go to their family's home for the holiday. They are gone for about a week. Sally returns and Dick returns 2 days later, with his kids in tow. Huh? Who are you? This is New Year's Eve, I think. My cousin has come to visit. Strike one. No one texted me to let me know there was going to be kids, and my cousin and I had weed and liquor on the counter. And those kids can get their own weed and liquor. That night, Harry agrees to drop me and my cousin at a party and says he will pick us up. To just text him. I say, are you sure? It will likely be after 2 a.m. He says yes. At 1:30 I text him saying we were ready, and he says he's too tired, but that Dick will pay for our Uber home. Fine. The next day I went to the grocery store and got some stuff for breakfast for myself and my cousin. I forgot to get waffles for the kids, but there's other food so they can eat that. A few days pass and the kids and Dick go back to his family home. He returns and is supposed to leave by the 6th. But I've seen his reluctance to go back home to the West Coast. He doesn't have a home to return to, so he will stay with some girl he was hooking up with. I tell him Harry would likely let him stay with us and that he could share my room and bed if he wants. Yes, Dick is hot, and we fooled around before but never hooked up. Not why I was offering, though. Anyway, the 6th comes and I get home from work and guess who's still on the couch? Dick. He has also gone through the fridge with Harry and thrown stuff out. Strike 2. He doesn't live here and doesn't know what is mine or Sally's. He threw out some of my stuff and a container that I was keeping. I was irritated, but whatever, I guess. A few days later, I get a text from Harry that Dick is going to stay with us for a while and they will share a room. Fine. A day or so later, I come home and almost immediately vomit. The entire kitchen looks different. Things have been rearranged. Strike 3. I'm disappointed. Harry comes upstairs to the kitchen area and says hi. I beeline for my room where I have a rage-induced panic attack and destroy a TV with a sword. Bit of an overreaction, I know. But it was an awful feeling coming back to my home where I pay rent looking so different. They had moved my coffee maker, my kettle was missing, just threw me off. This happens 2 more times. After the first time, Dick apologized, says he has some ADHD nervous energy and gets it out by cleaning. I'm angry. He doesn't live here. Why is he rearranging things? Why does Harry think this is okay? And I know that Sally, Dick, and Harry are all right with the changes, but I'm not. And my opinion should count. Another thing that happens is that Dick smokes hookah. Hookah makes me nauseous and gives me a headache, so I ask him to not smoke on the main floor. Go outside, like Sally and I do to smoke, or to the basement. He apologizes and agrees. 2 days later, I come home again, smell hookah. I can't cook or utilize the main floor. I send a message to the landlord and tell him to tell his guest to stop smoking on the main floor because I, a paying tenant, can't utilize what I'm paying for. I also tell him to stop letting himself and his guest move my stuff in the common areas. Why would I tell the landlord this? Because Harry is the landlord. The more irritating part is that Harry and Dick are business partners, property management, and are using Harry's house to get business started. Harry responds to my message and agrees. There's an uneasy peace for a few days. Last week I got woken up at 1 a.m. because Dick and Sally were laughing and talking loud as hell. Strike 4. I'm angry. I got in my room for 30-ish minutes listening to the BS, and then go to the bathroom. What do I smell when I leave my room? Bloody hookah strike 5! I go downstairs and say to Dick, Sally has gone to her room at this point, that if he doesn't want to hear my mouth about smoking hookah on the main floor, then he needs to shut the hell up at 1 a.m. He asks if they were too loud, and I glare and say, "As hell, dude." He apologizes. This dude, who I have a lot of love for, we're technically friends, has moved into my home, commandeered the living room, reorganized the kitchen more than one time, smokes on the main floor even though he knows he's not supposed to, and is now waking me up at night. I'm furious. I was late for work the next day because I have insomnia and couldn't go back to sleep till 4. I have to get up at 5 a.m. and leave for work by 6:30. I woke up at 6:44. I texted Dick and Sally and let them know I was upset about the disrespect. Dick apologized again and said that seeing his sister, who he hasn't seen in a while, carried him away. Bro, you've been with her almost every day for a bloody month. I also work 6 days a week. I've gone minimum 7 hours a day. In all that time that I'm not home, you can't kiki with her? From 6:30 p.m., when I get home-ish, to reasonable weekend quiet time, 10 p.m., you can't laugh and talk to her then? Sally doesn't apologize, but deflects. Dick says, we need a house meeting so everyone's needs can be met. He is a guest. He doesn't pay to live here. He just leeches off Harry and Sally. He doesn't have a job, no car, nothing. Why should I do anything to accommodate him? Harry, Dick, and Sally have now been hanging out and doing stuff as a trio. I've never been invited. Not that I want to. I'm furious with all of them. Also, Dick doesn't stay in Harry's room. He sleeps in the living room on the couch. I get up and start moving at 5 a.m. I'm in the kitchen. By 6 a.m., prepping my food for the day. At first I was courteous of the fact that he was asleep on the couch, but after the "he will stay in my room" text and the other stuff, I stopped caring. I turned the lights on, closed cabinets regularly, used the tap, etc. Regular kitchen noise, I don't care if it wakes him up. I even gave him an air mattress and pillow for the basement. Anyway, those are my bad roommates. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Bad Roommates, episode 52. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please do hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already done so. And if you would like to support me on my Patreon page, even $1 a month is very helpful. I would appreciate that. Okay, no more bits and bobs today, I don't think, so let's move on to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is, how are those New Year's resolutions coming along? We're nearly, 3 weeks, a little bit over 3 weeks into the new year. Are you keeping going with them if you've made any? Or have you dropped them already and figured, there's always next year? Now, as mentioned before, I haven't really made any, but the changes that I did happen to make near the start of the year, I am sticking with. I've been using my treadmill a little bit every day, and I'm gradually building up how much I use it. And I am quite enjoying it, actually. It's quite nice just to put something on the TV, and it honestly, you don't feel the physical stress of it. Not that I do walk about anyway, but walking on a treadmill is a little bit different than walking regularly. But I'm getting there. I'm getting the speed up. I'll be adjusting the time a bit more as well. So let me know what you think in a comment below. And before we go, let's take a look at the answer of the day from a previous video. And this one comes from Bad Roommates 50. We had 2 that week, I believe. And let's see. The question was, is there like a video, some sort of entertainment that you have just kind of on loop lately because it's doing nice things for your brain? And today's answer comes from, where I had that a second ago. Let's see, today's answer comes from M. Lee. Recently, the show I've been watching on repeat is called Red Wall. It's an animation based on the book of the same name by the author Brian Jacques. I always come back to it every other year or so, and it takes me back to the summer of 1997, when my brother and I were kids watching it for the first time. We would spend the morning at the park, then grab lunch, and head home just in time to watch it all summer long. Well, that's a lovely memory. Thank you very much for sharing it with us, M. Lee. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.